Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Anthony Lisho, and I'm a transition consultant at sales representative with Tier 3 brokerage. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes to allow participants to be admitted to the webinar. So I don't know about any of the people that are already on, but have you noticed the leaves are starting to turn already? And the thing that told me that summer's over is that on Yonge Street, they're starting to take those awful roadside patios. All those block things have gone, or most of them anyway.
Brett, what's the weather like there where you are?
This morning.
So it's morning time in Australia, and yeah, it's a beautiful day. You know, it's spring. It's springtime, Anthony. So, you know, lovely, fresh, 20 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit.
How much do I have to give you to trade? You can take what's coming to us, and I'll take what's coming for you.
Says the flow of the seasons, Anthony. You can trust that, you know, spring will come to you. You know, just be patient.
We are in Celsius here, Brett. So I don't think anyone other than Anthony or I would know what.
Oh, is that right? There you go.
Yes.
That's of course.
Sorry,
Apologies.
I think Anthony and I are the only two people old enough to have been taught first in Fahrenheit. And then
what was the number? What was the number?
20.
It's about 20.
72.
Oh, 20 degrees.
Yeah, same as here pretty well, actually.
Well, that's 68.
Yeah.
That's room temperature.
It's lovely.
Yeah. So we appreciate you attending, Brett, especially considering the fact that it is a public holiday there. And so you did not get to sleep in on a day that you might otherwise have been allowed to.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm sure the Queen will forgive me.
Yes, I'm sure the Queen will forgive you.
He was a working woman, so
I'm sorry, Brett, but now it's God bless the King. Heaven help us. Thank you. Thank you to those who have been waiting for the webinar to begin. And to those who have just joined us, welcome to the last evening in our three-part series entitled Taking First Steps Towards Your Eventual Transition. This evening, we will focus on how to improve your practice now before you sell. Tier 3 will speak along with dental industry experts RevUp Dental Prime Practice and Henry Schein. We're excited to be able to share with you strategies to better understand your practice metrics and how simple changes now can increase your value prior to eventual sale of your practice. You may ask questions to any of the presenters throughout the evening. Please submit your queries, any queries you may have under the question and answer icon located at the bottom of your screen and not the chat area. We will not be monitoring the chat area. You may also notice throughout the night there will be poll questions from time to time. Please answer these questions as they are provided to allow our speakers to gear their presentations to those in attendance. When the presentation portion of the webinar is complete, we'll take time to answer as many questions as possible in the time allotted. In the interest of time, we may not be able to answer all of the questions. However, we will provide contact information to the presenters so that they may reach out so that you may reach out to them after the webinar with any additional questions that you may have. My role this evening will be to moderate the webinar. Again, my name is Dr. Anthony Lisho. Together with my colleagues Barb Johnson and Kelly Hoffman, we are sales representatives and transition consultants at Tier 3 brokerage. Between us, we have decades of experience in the industry. We encourage each and every one of you to reach out to us if you have any questions about your practice during or after the webinar. I would like to take a few minutes to introduce fellow industry experts from RevUp Dental Prime Practice and Henry Schein. From RevUp Dental, Nick Fotash is the company's founder and CEO. RevUp is a digital marketing and software development company focused on helping dentists grow their practice. I wish I had that when I was in practice. Initially starting out in IT, Nick worked with many dentists in Ontario, helping them with tech support issues, and quickly realized that most dentists have no idea what is going on in their office day to day. Nick saw an opportunity to develop a system similar to what large enterprise companies and DSOs were using, but at a price that would be affordable to the average independently owned dental practice. Also with RevUp this evening, we're privileged to have Andrea Fernandez is their senior account manager. Andrea understands the importance of the link between successful dental practices, dentists, and a strong marketing strategy. There are too many marketing agencies out there that keep dentists and their staff out of the loop, forgetting that the success of marketing lies in teamwork. Andrea and her team at RevUp Dental focus on becoming external team members in each and every dental practice they work with. Andrea's educational background makes her an effective listener and an excellent communicator. From Prime Practice, Brett Cherning is the general manager and client relationships at Prime Practice, a company that has provided training and business solutions for the dental community for the last 26 years. Based in Sydney, Australia, Brett manages a team of business coaches and consultants who support practice owners and their team across the globe. He is also the lead trainer in their world-renowned and unique patient communication approach, a course called Prime Speak, which was first introduced to North America audiences back in 2007. Today, Brett will be sharing with you some key tips and techniques from Prime Speak that will support you to increase case acceptance and patient retention without a hint of hard selling. And Anthony Archer, is Anthony Archer joining us tonight?
He is indeed, Dr. Licio, he is.
There you are. There you are.
He'll be joining you for sure.
All right, okay. Anthony's with Henry Schein Canada. He is the Toronto branch manager in charge of field service consultants. So let's get started now with our first presenters of the evening, Barb Johns and Kelly Hoffman of Tier 3. But before we begin, we have a quick poll to start.
While we're waiting for the poll to pop up for everyone, Anthony, we're glad that you were able to make it. We thought you might not be able to join us until 8 o'clock, so we're pleased that you were able to sneak in a little earlier.
There
Happy to
we
be
are.
here.
There's the
Thank you, Barb.
poll. I encourage everyone to answer, please. Really helps everybody out.
We're going to give everybody, 15 or 20 seconds more to answer the poll. It will help us to be able to gear some of what we're talking to tonight towards you specifically. There we go. So most of you are in fact owners, it looks like, and there was just a small percentage that didn't answer the question, and sometimes that's a technology issue. You couldn't figure out how to answer it fast enough, and we understand that too. Okay, thanks so much for that.
And now welcome Barb and Kelly.
Thank you, Anthony. So tonight we really wanted to talk to you about, I'm skipping things. I don't know why my computer keeps skipping slides. Wanted to talk to you about your practice value. Obviously, if you're going to improve the value in your practice, you need to understand first how value is determined. And you guys have seen this before. You'll probably see it again in the future. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but your future revenue minus your future costs is your future cash flow in the practice. And value is assessed as a multiple of that cash flow. So the future cash flow times a multiple, usually somewhere between 5 and 7 for GP practices in Ontario, that equals the practice value at the time of the sale. Simple, right? So you guys can determine your historical cash flow fairly easily. Look at your own financial statements, look at your expenses, look at your revenue, figure out, what's left over at the end of the day, and that's your cash flow. But that doesn't necessarily take into consideration all the add backs. So when we're looking at future potential cash flow, there's a lot of things that affect value. You may recognize this image from the last webinar we did. I'm not going to spend any time on it other than to say there's lots of things that affect your potential value, some greater, some less. So how does this relate to increasing your value and the value in your practice? So you need to increase your revenue, you need to decrease your costs, and that'll equal greater cash flow. And greater cash flow equals a higher value when you go to sell. So let's talk about revenue now. And we'll look at the first piece of that, because we said we have to look at revenue expenses. Patients and only patients generate revenue in your practice. If you don't have any bottoms sitting in the chair, then there's no revenue coming in. So you need the right systems in place. You need to be able to understand where improvement may be needed. And Kelly Hoffman, my colleague, is going to talk to you about tracking. She's going to talk to you about the systems in your practice. You need to continue to grow your patient base to offset attrition. You want to reverse any negative declines that are in your practice right now, and you want to make sure you've got revenue coming in the future. And that's where Andrea and Nick from RevUp Dental are going to speak to you regarding how they and marketing can potentially help with that. You need patients with a really high dental IQ. So you need well-trained staff, and that includes you as a well-trained owner, to promote good oral health and to promote treatment acceptance. And Brett from Prime Practice is going to speak to everyone tonight regarding that. And you need the right equipment to generate the right revenues. Can't generate any revenue the way you may want to if you don't have the right equipment to do so. Anthony Archer from Henry Schein is going to speak to that in a little while. So let's talk about your expenses. So I'm not really going to talk a lot about revenue because other people are going to talk about ways to increase revenue. I'm going to talk about your expenses and maybe help think about ways to decrease your expenses. So if you can save $1 moving forward, that's going to turn into $6 more in your practice value when you go to sell. That doesn't sound that great. Yeah, I'll save $1. Who cares? I just make $6 more. But let's put that another way. If you could save $50,000 in expenses, that would be another $250,000 to $350,000 in your practice value when you go to sell. So every single dollar counts. Whether you're 6 months away, 2 years away, 10 years away, or 20 years away from, considering selling a practice, you can improve your value right now. The best part of that is not only will your value be worth more at the finish line, but you're actually going to bring home more money because you're not going to be spending it on expenses unnecessarily. So your three biggest expenses in your practice are your payroll, your salary and wages, your occupancy costs, and your dental supplies. And you can't really do anything about your salary and wages, not easily. You've got, people on contract, not on contract. We've got staff shortages since COVID happened, all of those things contributing to that. So we're not going to really touch that for tonight. Your occupancy costs are a pretty stable cost. You already have a lease in place. You know what your lease and your TMI is being over last year, what it's likely to be next year, the year after. So whether you rent or whether you own, if you own, you have mortgage costs, same thing, mortgage costs, TMI. So you know kind of what to expect for your occupancy costs. Your dental supplies are another area where there may be some opportunity for savings. And I'm going to leave that primarily up to Anthony later to discuss, but I'll touch on it a little bit. What I really wanted to do right now is show you a sample financial statement. You guys all have your own. This is from a client that was my client, okay? And I want you to take a look at 4 things. The first thing on the right is those dental supplies I was talking about. So in this particular case, this client's dental supplies were coming in over 10% of their gross revenue. That's very high. That means 10% of every penny that came in through the front door was going out in the form of dental supplies. So there's an opportunity in this practice to probably improve that. And so it could be because you're ordering from way too many different suppliers, because you're not consolidating, because you're over ordering certain things without the others. You need a budget. You need to put a budget in place. You need to follow that budget so you can figure out where the spending, where and how you're spending that money. You need to maybe talk to sales reps about using in-house brands or not necessarily the brand name brands, which can provide the exact same product for a lot of savings. So this particular client, after he and I spoke, he was able to reduce his dental supplies by 20 grand the next year. A 20 grand savings meant $120,000 to $140,000 more in his practice value when he went to sell. So let's look at 3 other areas. Repairs and maintenance is another one. Again, this is extremely high compared to what we see in most practices. Now, maybe you say, but I have an older practice, so my equipment needs more maintenance on an ongoing basis. If that's the case, then rather than spending $45,000 every year, over 5 years, that's $250,000. Maybe the big ticket equipment pieces that are causing all of that huge, or that, $200,000 in cost, maybe you need to replace some of the equipment. Replace the equipment, so now you have no repairs and maintenance. With the equipment that you've replaced, you can also depreciate that equipment over time, and it actually provides you a better tax savings because it becomes a tax deduction. Let's look at, and again, my client, $20,000 they saved. The other thing he did, by the way, is he went on a regular maintenance program, so that he didn't have as many ups and downs and expenses, one-time expenses. He was maintained regularly. Interest and bank charges. For this particular client, this was all bank charges. This client had already long since paid off his own practice loan and did not have any equipment leases, so there were no lease payments and no interest for that. So this was all bank charges. That's almost 4% of this practice's gross revenue was going to the bank just for the privilege of using their debit and credit machine. Okay, so what I want you to know is people often don't know, but Costco is someplace I'd like you to consider talking to. So Costco is more than just bulk purchases. It's more than just groceries. Costco offers a lot of different services, and one of them is the use of a point of sale machine, a debit and credit machine. You can get that through them. My client did that and reduced his bank charges by $15,000 the very next year. $15,000, again, means another $75,000 to $90,000 in practice value. Costco also offers telephone services. Now, my client had pretty reasonable telephone costs, but I've seen other clients whose telephone costs have been $8,000, $9,000, $13,000 per year. So there's a potential to really save a lot by potentially leaving Bell or Rogers or Cogeco or Shaw or whoever you're using for your telephone services. There may be a cheaper alternative for you that is just as reliable. So for this particular client, he was able to save $55,000 between 1 year and the next. And that $55,000 turned into another $360,000 in his practice value, guys. So it was worth the phone call to Costco. It was worth having the discussions with their supply people. Okay, now I'm going to pass it over to Kelly, who's going to talk to you about tracking and systems. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Barb. I want to talk about a couple of key metrics within the practice that really, if you're not tracking, will give you an understanding of really are some of the systems working. The first one, production per hour. This should be for each individual hygienist as well as associates. Now, obviously, with the doctors as a principal owner, you can choose to be as productive as you want to be. However, for associates, if you're having to hire an assistant, understanding, is it going to be profitable for the practice? This should be twofold, meaning that you really need to look at their production per hour when they're fully scheduled, as well as one that includes their downtime. You need to be able to see the big picture, because they can be very profitable on an hourly basis, but if you're looking at the big picture and it's not profitable, then that is something that you need to take a deeper dive and take a look at. Obviously, the cost of dentistry is going up, and so downtime is something we don't really want to have. It'd be ideal if we had no downtime. However, tracking it and understanding where you are in your downtime percentage. Generally, if you can keep for doctors under 5%, that's a great goal. Hygiene, it's not often as realistic to have that. Maybe 8 to 10% is more common. Unfortunately, the appointments with the hygienist don't often come with the same value, and they tend to get more no-shows and cancellations. But really understanding where what your downtime percentage is really important. And if you haven't established a downtime protocol for your practice, it's a good place to start, because it really sets expectation of your team, what they need to do when they do have downtime. In terms of referrals in and out of the practice, this is great to know whether you're selling or whether, you know, you're looking to bring on an associate, you know, knowing the services that you refer out of the office. This is going to help you to find the associate that hopefully complements the needs of your practice and your patients. And keep in mind when it comes to, you know, having this data at the time of an appraisal or even at the time of the sale is absolutely more powerful than an estimate. So it's great if you can be tracking those numbers starting today. It's a great thing to know. Obviously, new patients are key to track, and not just looking at the new patient codes. We know that patients come in on emergencies and often can then be converted over to new patients. So making sure that you're tracking and understanding the first time they've been entered into the computer. And obviously knowing where the, you know, where the return on your marketing investment is. And I know that RevUp is going to speak to marketing for sure. And obviously I would suggest case acceptance is another area to track. And I know Prime Practice will address that. So on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about patient counts and the systems that impact. And before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about, you probably hear a lot about active patients. You know, what defines active is really only their status on the computer. So we look at production on a yearly basis, and understanding the number of patients that generate that revenue from year to year is really what's important. And understanding, are we on an upscale? Like, are we, is the practice growing or is the practice in decline? So this number, the total number of patients that you have in your practice year over year is really important to know, because it really will help determine not only the number of doctor hours you need to be offering for your practice, but the number of hygiene hours that you need, or maybe how many hours the practice should be open. And then looking at your facility and knowing the number of operatories that you have in your practice and knowing benchmarks, this is going to help you to navigate and make decisions that'll tend to be more profitable based on data and knowledge, not based on what you think or what you feel. So understanding those benchmarks and numbers is key. Obviously, when we talk about patients, the purge is so important. This process really allows you to have a pulse of the patient count and should be done routinely in your practice, regardless of whether you're paper or electronic charts. I think the impression is when you're electronic, you don't necessarily need to purge, but it really is important that this be done on a regular basis and that your administration team really does understand the software well enough when addressing the patient status in the computer for those that will not necessarily be returning to the practice, because this can impact your recall list. So it kind of leads into computer utilization, and really this is often an area of enhancement because a lot of teams don't often maximize the software capabilities. And this can be on a couple of areas. And I just mentioned in terms of the patient count, if the status isn't necessarily addressed, they can be lost and not picked up on your recall system. So if you've ever had a patient that calls in and says, I didn't get a phone call, so I just thought I'd call. You know, if they're not utilizing the software properly, they can be lost. So also, is the team posting any pending treatment? You know, anytime you should be able to print off an outstanding treatment list or treatment that's pending in the office to know how much revenue potentially is there. The recall system, you know, really having an understanding, you know, of who's overdue or who may be delinquent. So on the graph on the right, you'll see, you know, at Tier 3, you know, obviously we're very data driven, but you should be able to understand year over year how many patients not only have you gotten the new patients, but how many necessarily haven't returned, and are they really truly overdue for a recall or are they delinquent? And if they're delinquent, then really is it an opportunity to reactivate? Because it's always going to be easier to reactivate a patient than it is to get a whole new patient. One other thing to keep in mind with computer utilization is that you can only have one line in your recall in your software. So let's say you have a patient who, if you're setting up in your software their recall line based on their insurance dictation, if they have an exam only covered every 6 months or 9 months, but yet they're a 3 or 4 month patient, the reality is they're not going to be picked up as frequently as they should be. So that can be lost revenue. So making sure that you have the right recall line attached in the software. And that comes back to computer utilization. Downtime, you know, obviously, if you have excessive downtime, this could be a reflection of lack of alignment with your hours and your patient count. It's not uncommon for us to see practices that may be struggling because they have a full-time expense engine, but they have a part-time patient base. So, you know, this would be a perfect example, would be a startup, would be one that maybe if they haven't, you know, staggered their hours or their staff to reflect their patient base and grown, this would be a reflection of excessive downtime. But so these are some of the basic things really in terms of softwares that relate to your patient count that are key to know. So I'll talk about the soft tissue management program briefly here. A couple of things to take into consideration: compliance. You know, do you know the total number of patients that engage in your hygiene program? Obviously, those practices that are very desirable on the market have a very high compliance rate of in the 90s, or at least in the high 80s. Keep in mind, though, that if you are in a rural area or an area that is, you know, more north, you may have a lower compliance rate. Retention: do the patients come in on the interval recommended? So a perfect example, if Mrs. Smith is due on if she's recommended to come in 4 times a year, pull her chart out of curiosity and see, is she coming only twice? That's a 50% success rate. So if that's the case, this is an area for patient education, to work with your team, or maybe is it overcoming insurance dictation? And if you still have a practice that's more standardized in terms of patients are given the same interval or receive the same number of scaling units, this is absolutely an area of enhancement to be more patient specific. So those are just a few things to consider to review in your practice. And morning meetings, if you haven't already started them, they're really a great way to start communication in a lot of these areas, and that you can introduce the conversation with you and your team. It's something you can put in place right away. So I will, on that note, I'll pass it back over to Barb.
Barb, you're muted.
I noticed, thanks. We really wanted to kind of end our sort of section to say that, you know, if you want to know the potential areas for enhancement in your practice, and that's everything from where your expenses are, your expense engine, to your revenue generating engine, to everything else, the place to start is an appraisal. Look at an appraisal with a good appraisal company. It's not going to give you every single metric that you're looking for. It just isn't, but it's going to give you a really good starting point. It's going to let you know where you are, where you need to go, what you need to enhance, and what you need to look at more closely. It's going to let you know what percentage of your retirement your practice represents. It's going to let you come up with a path and a plan to get to where you want to be. So, and your family has increased protection if disaster strikes. So, you know, if you're at least 5 years away, consider getting that done, and maybe getting it done every 5 years so you can stay on top of your practice. If you're only 6 months away from selling and you think, well, I just want to be out in 6 months, what's the point? Don't you still want to know what your value is before you start that process? So it's just a starting point for you. We're going to hand it back to Anthony now.
Thank you very much, Barb. I really liked your presentation, yours and Kelly's. The dollar saving worth 6 times, you know, your value going down, going forward. And Kelly, your numbers really mean a lot, especially the 12-month figures. So thank you very much to both of you. We'll now continue with Nick Fotash and Andrew Fernandez of RevUp Dental. Please welcome.
Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So my name is Nick. I run a company called RevUp Dental. And today what I want to teach you is how you can drive more new patients. This is something we specialize in. We built a lot of systems and software around that. And what I want to show you today is help you better understand why people pick certain dentists and not others, why they might be picking your competitor across the street instead of your practice. So understanding their journey, what they go through, what they look at when deciding which dentist to go to. Give you some practical strategies that you can utilize, things you can put into practice with your own team. And if there's any time left over, we can do some Q&A as well. The biggest point I want to drive home to you guys is it really doesn't matter how good you are at what you do if most people don't know you exist, okay? One of the biggest things that holds dental practices back is, you know, you've got a great dentist, great practice, great team. They do, you know, amazing dental work. But because their marketing isn't really up to par, they're kind of like a best kept secret, right? It's like the best dentist most people in that area have never heard about. and probably never will, right? Because if you're going online and you're looking for a dentist, either they, show up on like page 5 or 6 of Google and no one's ever going to go there. So the only way you'd really go in there is if you're lucky enough to know somebody who's a patient of theirs and maybe they refer you. So how do you get people to know that you exist? These days, Google is probably one of the best ways you're going to drive visibility, because most people just go on the internet, they go on their phone, they type in dentist near me, and that's how they find, what they're looking for. Same thing with like, if you're looking for a product on Amazon, right? The problem with Google is it's incredibly competitive. These days, most dentists out there understand the value of coming up, when somebody's searching for a dentist online. So here's some stats. In Canada, there's about 115,000 people every month looking for dentists near me. And it's really hard to rank for that. Like, it's very competitive. When it comes to advertising, you can see here the $7. That's on average what dentists are willing to spend just to get a click to their website. Not a lead or a new patient, just somebody to like visit their website if they're interested in, if they're looking for a dentist near me. Dental implants. Same sort of thing. You'll see like an increase over time of more and more people are going online to look for dentists, but it's super hard to rank for, like sometimes dental implants, and dentists are willing to spend an average of, around $8 just for a click. And if you're like in Toronto, it might be like $20, $30 because it's incredibly competitive. Invisalign, same sort of story. But there is another way to kind of think about this. Most people spend a lot of time and effort trying to go after like dentist in Toronto, Invisalign in Toronto, like the really competitive keywords. The smarter way to go about this is to think about all the questions that people would be searching for if they're interested in implants, Invisalign, or any of these things. So if I look for a term like dental implants, there's actually about over 900 different types of questions that people would go on Google to ask, like how much does it cost? Are implants better than dentures? Is it worth it? What do they feel like? Do they look and feel like natural teeth? It's a lot easier to get your website to the top when somebody searches that type of question. It might be hard to see on the screen, but here you have in this column keyword difficulty score. So you'll see 7, 0, 13. It's much lower than 55, 77. Basically, it's a lot easier to rank for these keywords. There's a really awesome tool I think you guys should all be using. It's called Answer the Public. It's free. You can do a couple searches every day. Go to Answer the Public, type in something like Invisalign, implants, like whatever type of service you want to do more of. And it's going to help you understand the types of questions people go online to search for if they're interested in that product or service. And it organizes in this like interesting little wheel where it breaks down the questions by who, what, when, where, why, those kind of categories. So in just a couple minutes, I was able to find all these really great questions that, people in Canada do search for if they're looking for Invisalign. So things like, what does it look like when you're wearing them? Can Invisalign fix overbite? Can it fix underbite? Can it widen my smile? Can it damage my teeth? When doesn't it work? Is it better than braces? Can it help TMJ? Like these are all the types of things that are going on in their head when they're thinking about, should I be doing this service? So if you want to rank better, you really just need great content that answers those questions that people who are looking for that service have. When we build websites and landing pages, one of the first things we focus on is just have really in-depth content. Just answer just about anything they're looking to figure out. What does it look like? What does it feel? Do I have to take time off work? Is it going to hurt? Is it covered by insurance? Like everything, just give them all the information. Ideally, if you could do this in a video, it's even better. We get a lot of our dentists to just go on camera and just answer these questions because it gives people kind of like a chance to virtually meet you. And, if they get a good first impression from that, it sounds like it's a nice dentist, like they seem to be very honest and straightforward, they're going to get a good first impression from you. We're very transparent about costs. I don't know why people keep hiding this. You all follow the Ontario Dental Fee Guide. I mean, you could just be open about roughly kind of what it costs for these services. But then you go into detail about what are the factors that are going to influence the price. Depends on your unique situation. What tooth are you missing? Your oral health. Are you a smoker? Are you, that kind of stuff. So this gives you an opportunity to explain to them, like, here's all the things that go into it. That's why it's hard for us to just give you a quote unless you come in and see us. Testimonial videos. really important. And my colleague Andrew is going to talk a lot more about that and how that will help you drive a lot more traffic and patients. We focus a lot on like, who is the dentist who's going to do this work on me, right? Why are they qualified? You know, why should I trust them? Where did they go to school? Is there anything unique about them that, you know, sets them apart? Establish social proof. In this particular example, this dentist won the 3 best rated dentists in Mississauga award. You know, as a patient, if I'm considering different dentists, you know, if I see something like that, it might sway me to pick this practice over somebody else. And we answer most of the common questions that they have. You know, are there alternative to implants? Is it better to get dentures or implants? You know, what's the pros and cons? And if you can answer this on video, it's really powerful. So to show you that this actually does work, and answering these questions actually helps you rank better for those, you know, more difficult keywords. You can see here, if you Google dentist in Hamilton, one of our clients is number 2. You know, in Thunder Bay, both of the clients we work with are at the top. Dental implants in Mississauga, we're number 1. You know, we have a lot of, you know, it works. Okay, we've done this for a lot of different practices. These strategies that we put into practice, they will improve your ranking significantly. And the reason it works is people don't want to call you or have to come in for a consultation in order to get information, right? We're not in the yellow pages days anymore. People want to do their research and kind of learn most of what they need to before they decide to call you. So if Google also sees that you're kind of giving them that information, people are going to have a better experience, and they're going to, you know, reward you with better rankings, and you'll get a lot more phone calls. But this leads me to point 2, is that once they call, what happens? Because ultimately people, you know, they're going to do business with people they like and trust. So the impression you create on that first phone call really matters. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Andrea. She's going to walk you through, you know, that part of the process as well.
Perfect. Hi, guys. So I'm just going to share my screen as well here. So bear with me. Everybody can see my screen? Okay, so yes, like Nick was saying, people do business with people they like, or they buy from people they like and people they trust. So how do you get people to like you and to trust you before they're even picking up the phone and calling your practice, or before they're sitting in front of you and realizing that you're a fantastic dentist? Well, what most marketing companies are going to sell you on is that you need to rank well. You need to be on the first page of Google. The visibility needs to be there for you. And that's absolutely true. But if you find yourself in that number 1 spot, and then someone looks at your website presence and, you know, it appears very generic. It just says, you know, we treat patients like family, or we offer dental implants. People see that everywhere. People are going to be less inclined to pick up the phone and actually call your practice. So how do you set yourself apart, and how do you get people to trust you and to like you before, you know, they pick up the phone and call you? So number 1, you need to have the most Google reviews in the area, or you at least need to be in the top 3 spots. So Google reviews are the first place that people are going to judge you. People find dentists online these days, like Nick said, by typing in dentist near me, or implants near me, or, you know, orthodontist near me. That's when you're going to come up in comparison to your competitors. So if you're this guy over here and you have 4.5 reviews and 4.5 stars and 71 reviews, or you're like our client here that has 5 stars and 304 reviews, whose website do you think people are going to click on? Like, whose website would you click on first? It's the same thing as if you're shopping for a product on Amazon and you see 2 similar products. You're naturally going to choose the product that has, you know, better reviews, because they're based on real people's real experiences with that product. It's the same thing as when people are looking for a dentist. It's the same process that people follow. The second thing we're really huge on is building collecting testimonial videos. So another way to build trust and credibility, which we don't see many dental practices doing except for our clients, is to get your patients on camera talking about how great their experience has been at your practice. So think about it. If somebody is looking for a cosmetic procedure, like cosmetic dentistry, Invisalign implants, that's a much harder sell than somebody who has an emergency appointment, or, you know, just wants to come in for a checkup and cleaning. So when a patient's considering thousands of dollars on a procedure, they're going to do their research. They're going to shop around a little bit more, and they're going to make their final decision based off of who they feel offers offers them the most value, who they like, who they trust. So how do you grab their attention and make them like you and trust you before they're picking up the phone to call you when they're on your website? You get real patients on camera sharing their real stories with your practice, right? So we have kids getting their braces off for the first time, and they're just, looking at their smile for the first time and just excited. I've got grown men, grown women crying on camera after they're seeing their, fully reconstructed smile after, not liking it for so many years, right? That's the type of stuff that's going to set you apart from your competitors who's saying, like, we do dental implants, as opposed to having somebody crying on camera about how amazing their dental implants are. So let your patients speak for you. Step 3 is you want to leave them with a really great first impression when they call. So the most important lesson that I've learned from working with dental practices is that your front desk team will 100% make or break your dental practice. It does not matter if you're the best and most experienced dentist in the world. It doesn't matter if you're a specialist in your field. One of the first impressions that people are making with your practice is by talking to the front desk team. So if the team doesn't know how to essentially be a salesperson on the phone, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for, right? So the average dental practice only closes about 30% of new patient calls into appointments. So our data shows that 1 out of 3 new patient calls don't even get answered. And of the 2 of 3 new patient calls that are answered, less than half of them are actually booked. So what are some of the common assumptions of why patients don't book? So, reasons that you hear from your staff, or reasons that you might even think, are that they're price shopping, right? Or they're not serious. But in reality, patients call around to see who's offering the most value. So they're going to do their research on who they like the most, who they trust the most, and ultimately who they feel is going to take the best care of them, right? So like I said, see the most value. What's the real reason that they're not booking? It's your team is struggling to communicate value, and nobody is actually following up with, new patients who potentially didn't book in. So I remember when I first started we listen to all of our client calls that come in, new and existing patients. And when I first started listening to them, I was like, Nick, some of these people on the phone, like, it's terrible. And he's like, okay, smartass, like, how would you handle the call then? And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't work in dentistry. I'm not, a dental assistant. And he's like, that doesn't matter. Like, great customer service has absolutely nothing to do with the field that you work in. It's all about how you talk to patients, how you make them feel. So ultimately, you have to be a good personality, and you have to have a few sales tactics up your sleeve to really gain control of the conversation, take it away from being, patient-led, and move it over to being receptionist-led, learning to sell the sizzle of the practice and the doctor a little bit. It's a few sales tactics and a good personality at the end of the day. We also discovered that the majority of receptionists, they're not following up if interested patients who called about, a particular service didn't book. So let's say somebody's calling about implants. They're probably going to do research. They're going to call you. They're going to call your competitor. They're going to decide who they like the most. So if your receptionist is the only one calling them back, 2 weeks down the line, asking, how's your research going? How are you feeling? Do you still want that Invisalign procedure, for your daughter's wedding? That's going to show that, they're thinking about you. This practice cares about me. They want my best interest. Again, that's what sets you apart, right? So it's not just the marketing at the end of the day. It's really about, every aspect of the practice working together alongside the marketing, which brings me to my next point. So your practice needs an accountability system. So you obviously understand that marketing is important. You understand that it helps you to get the phone to ring. But what you can't forget is that if you're going to be spending like a significant amount of money on marketing, you need to, 1, be holding your marketing company accountable, whether it be us, or another marketing company. And you need to hold your staff accountable for the new patient calls that are coming into the practice because of your marketing company. So this is the RevUp Dental Scorecard. This is a tool that we use. It's our accountability tool that we use with our clients. And essentially what we do is we track the return on investment each month. So, we track what the client is spending on marketing. We track what they're spending, anything extra, AdWords, flyers, magazine costs, whatever it may be. Then we actually have like a team that listens to, like I said, each and every phone call that comes through to the practice. So we're able to identify, X amount of leads called the practice. Then, like I said, because, we know how many people called in and we're listening to calls. We also know how many actually booked and turned into butts in the chair. So each month we're going to tell you, look, we drove you this many patients and your staff converted this many patients into new patient appointments. Then we break it down even more. So not only are we tracking the new patient appointments, we're also tracking what's happening to your existing patients, right? That's really important. Sometimes I see really low percentage rates on what's happening to existing patients. It's like 40%. It's like, guys, these are already the existing patients. Why are we having such a tough time getting them in, working on retention with the front desk staff? We also track, how many cancellations were there? Why were people canceling? We track, if they need to be contacted, make sure the staff is following up with them. Do we want to mark this person as a lost lead, or do we want to make sure that we follow up? Maybe something just came up in their schedule. We also track the missed call rates. Sometimes I take on a new office and I see that they have this really high missed call rate. And when I look at the data, it's, everybody's taking lunch at the same time on Tuesday afternoon when all the calls are pouring in, right? And then lastly, we track, how is the staff performing when somebody calls in versus how is the staff performing when somebody maybe emails in or uses, some sort of booking device that you have on your website. Beyond that, we track the performance of every team member that you have on the front desk. So, if you see that every month, Andrea is underperforming, then you know that you need to sit down and potentially work on some, good customer service, sales tips with Andrea. If Nick is always overperforming, which is usually the case, then you're going to give Nick like a pat on the back, right? And again, we listen. Like I said, our team actually listens to every call. You can also do this yourself. This isn't, book with us. You can be listening to every call that comes into your practice. And, we mark the ones that were not booked as not booked. And we explain why. Was it just because, you guys didn't accept ODSP coverage? Or was it because Andrea had trouble on the phone talking about, the price question? She wasn't able to take control of the call. So that's our scorecard. That's how we hold ourselves accountable as a marketing company, and how we hold your staff accountable as well. So if, I leave you with just one piece of information, it's definitely to invest in training your front desk team on sales. So you can have the greatest marketing company in the world. They can be sending you, tons and tons of new patient calls. But if the front desk team doesn't know how to secure them, especially when it comes to cosmetic dentistry, because it's a much harder sell, then you're going to have a tough time, getting the return on investment that you want out of marketing. So if that was helpful, you can head over to our YouTube page. You just type in RevUp Dental, and there's a lot of these educational videos that me and Nick do. You can also share them with your staff. They can watch them here. And if you want to talk to us, potentially work with us, or learn a little bit more about us, you can head over to RevUpDental.com. I believe the website's here, RevUpDental.com, and you can get in touch with us. So thanks, everybody. That's my bit.
Thank you very much, Nick and Andrea. Great information. Like and trust. I just really like that. Now, please welcome Brett Cherning of Prime Practice.
Thank you so much. I will take a moment. There we go. That looks okay, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Welcome, everyone. I've got my time to talk to you about increasing case acceptance. I love what Barb said before about, that your patient is the only way to increase the revenue. And from our perspective, really, ultimately, it's only three ways that you can do that, right? You can get more patients, which is what Andrea and Nick are really focused on, or you can do more with the patients that you've got, or you can see patients more regularly. So I'm just going to focus on the second one, which is this idea of like, what can we do with the patients that we've got? So that's the case acceptance side of things. So I guess in a way, it's like it's all about influence, right? Like, and we're all in an influencing job. And I love, again, what you said, Andrea, about, like the sales side at the front desk. Like, they are trying to influence patients to make an appointment. I'm trying to influence, the attendees today to take on some of our ideas. They're trying to influence their patients to accept optimum treatment. So, I love what John said. The greatest ability in business is to get along with others and to influence their actions. The problem with dentists, the conundrum that dentists face, is that, how do I do that? How do I influence my patients towards optimum dentistry in an ethical way without patients feeling like I'm trying to push them into something that they don't need or sell them something? That's the key area that I want to focus on. And part of the conundrum is, like, there's a lot of challenges that you guys face as dentists. I mean, if you think about it, ultimately you want the patient to think highly of you regardless of the choices that they make. And yet most of your patients, unfortunately, are looking for every reason to justify why they hate coming to see the dentist. The challenge continues. Your dream goal is to have patients who stay with you for life, and send their friends and family to you, and also choose optimum dentistry. That, unfortunately, is not the dream goal for most patients. Their dream goal is that, they'll come to you, you won't find any problems, they won't need any treatment, and they'll never need to come back. So that's another challenge that you guys face. And then we add to that challenge the fact that most patients don't have an appreciation for the damaging results of the existing condition. Those 4 words are really important for us. I know it's not 4, but damaging results of the existing condition. We call that the DREC in prime speak, because most people think if it doesn't hurt, then it can't be so bad. Think about it. Your most motivated patients are the emergency patients. If they're in pain, then they'll do anything to come and see you. But if they're not, and most of them are not, that's a different story. And most of them have what we call the homeostatic mindset. So they think that if it's stayed like that, if it's been like that for 20 years, it's going to be like that for the next 20 years. We know that that's not the case, but that's the challenge that we have to, overcome. A lot of this is really about understanding, the mechanics of the human brain. I'm definitely not an expert in this area, but I do know that when we as human beings are functioning from that place in the brain called the amygdala, we're functioning from a very emotive, very emotional place, lots of feeling. When we're functioning from that place in the brain called the hippocampus, we're functioning from a very rational and logical place. So if you think about the mindset of a dentist, when you guys are doing your work, you're definitely functioning from the hippocampus. You're focusing on you're rational, you're logical. You guys are hardwired to find the problems and then work out what is the right solution to fix those. But if you think about the mindset of most patients, it's not likely that they're functioning from the hippocampus. It's much more likely that they are functioning from the amygdala. In other words, it's not likely that they are jumping and skipping through the field saying, woohoo, I'm going to the dentist, Not in Canada, not in Australia, not anywhere where I've presented this all over the world have I ever seen that occur. So based on that, we know that the mindset of most patients is that there's a range of emotions there. And I haven't put anger there, but I know that there's a lot of patients that come in, but they haven't even touched them yet, and they're already angry. So given all of those challenges that you guys face, it's not unlikely that, or surprising that we then, hit these kind of obstacles or roadblocks when we're trying to get patients to accept more optimum treatment. So I'd like to provide you with some tools around that. We've been doing this for 26 years. I myself have been in the prime practice family for 20 years now. So I'm firmly a part of the furniture. Practice management is really the key that, to what we do, whether it's talking to owners about the business of dentistry or the patient experience, which is really what we're focusing on today, or leadership or systems and protocols, team engagement. They're the kind of HR. That's what we deal with all of our practices all over the world. Prime speak is the communications side of things, and it's quite a counterintuitive process. We did bring this to, as Anthony mentioned, we brought it to North America in 2007. Interesting time to launch a business, but we did incredibly well at that point in time because it was such a unique and effective process. That I mean, there's a lot of things that it does do, and it really is quite a special kind of approach. It's not easy to implement, but those people who do implement find that it has a massive impact on patient retention and case acceptance. Ultimately, all of those challenges come down to this point. And when we're talking about increasing case acceptance, if we think about and agree that there is almost always a gap between what patients walk in, particularly your new patients, what they walk in wanting or thinking they need, and what you as the dentist think that they need. And in our world, and in our experience, the bigger the gap, the more you need to work on your communication skills and your rapport building skills. And we know that if you can bridge that gap between what the patient thinks they need and what you think they need, then case acceptance will come, patient retention will come. Yeah. So that's what I want to focus on. For me, it's this analogy, and this is like, again, a really great tip for you guys. But, and I was talking to a dentist last night about it. Often dentists will be seeing a patient's oral health as like a puzzle that they're trying to put together. And what happens in the standard paradigm is they're putting it together in their own heads. And at the end of the appointment, they're presenting the patient with the puzzle all put together and saying, here's my recommendation. Here's what you need. And the patient's blown away, and it's like, no, see you later. I don't need that. Doesn't hurt. It's been like that for 20 years. No other dentist has ever told me this, right? The problem is giving them the puzzle like that all in at the end. So the prime speak approach is really about knowing what the puzzle is likely to look at the end, but being able to think about strategically in your communication, how can I what pieces of the puzzle do I need to give the patient throughout the appointment, such that they're actually I'm helping the patient to put the puzzle together with my support as the clinician. That's a very counterintuitive approach, but it really, really works. So today, I just want to give you 6 tips out of Prime Speak to help you to increase case acceptance without any kind of sense of hard selling. The caveat I will make is, use what you like, leave what you don't like, change what you need to. And if there's anything that I'm saying that goes against something that always works for you, please just leave it and stick with it. So that being said, I want to introduce you to the 2 ethical rules that are a foundation of Prime Speak. I think these are really fundamental. And one is that I want to offer you this idea to offer your patients what you would have if that was your mouth, or what you would offer to the patient if they were a loved one, a good friend, or a partner, or a kid, or a parent. I think that's a really ethical way to do dentistry. 2, to offer the options regardless of what you think or assume the patient can or can't afford. So, in Prime Speak, we say offer dentistry as if the dentistry was free. I can pretty much assure you, if you left this webinar right now and you don't live by those 2 rules, and you go back to your practice and you start living by those 2 rules, I can almost promise you that you will increase your case acceptance simply because you're offering more than you did before. Yeah. However, without a whole range of great communication skills, because you're offering more, you'll get more rejection. And if you get more rejection, you're living by those 2 rules. So you have to pair those 2 rules with a whole lot of communication skills underneath it. The other thing I'll say to those guys out there, because I know this is all about what happens at the end, how do you increase the value of your practice at the end, is time and time again, I've seen that experienced dentists who once upon a time lived by those 2 rules end up becoming, taking on TDS. You got that over there, Barb? TDS, it's very endemic in Australia. It's tired dentist syndrome. You get to the end of, the last few years and you drop this and you're like, tired dentist syndrome, I'm just going to give the patient what they think that they need. Yeah. Such a shame when the opportunity at the end of the game is to actually ramp things up. But it's not easy to do, because really all you want to do is to kind of relax and take things easy. anyway, those are the two rules. I will say this, even if those guys out there go, yeah, I practice this, I promise you don't practice these two rules all the time, every day. You're human. Sometimes it's like too hard. The gap is too much, and you don't always live by these two rules. It's understandable. But if you could practice them a little bit more, I'm very clear that it will increase case acceptance. I'm clear as well that some dentists have become so fearful of being accused of overtreatment that they end up underdiagnosing. You know, if I looked in the mouths of most Australians, most Canadians, and most people around the world, they'd probably see more underdiagnosis than I would see overtreatment. But, you know, it's understandable that there's a lot of fear about that underdiagnosis. We don't want to upset patients. We don't want negative reviews. We don't want to lose the patients. So there's a lot of fear. I mean, ultimately, it comes from that fear of rejection. So we need a rejection-proof approach, and Prime Speak, in my very biased and unashamedly biased, opinion, is definitely that approach. Maybe I'm going to ask you this now, and I think we can do this in the chat room. I think I've got some time to do it. Actually, you know what? I don't have time to do it. I'm not going to do it in the chat room. We'll do a poll in a second, but maybe just ask yourself this question. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to patients choosing optimum treatment? And if the first answer came up that there was money, that's understandable, because it's probably the biggest one that you hear. But I'm going to say today that it's not the number one obstacle. Clearly, if the patient doesn't own the problem, or they don't think they have a problem, they don't own the DREC, the damaging results of the existing condition, then it doesn't matter how much money they've got, they're not going to, in my opinion, they're not going to accept treatment. In the same respect, if the patient has all the money in the world but doesn't trust you, then again, I would assert that they're not going to accept treatment. So from our perspective in Prime Speak, low trust and low ownership gives you no case acceptance and no patient retention. A high trust but low ownership is going to give you patient retention but not case acceptance. A high level of ownership but a low level of trust means they're going to do what? Yes, that's right. Get a second opinion. They're going to go somewhere else. So what we always want to do, and this is the whole Prime Speak approach, is how do we both increase trust and increase the patient's ownership of the problem or the damaging results of the existing conditions. That's a key there. Develop your ability, whatever you can, to build trust and deepen the patient's ownership. That is really about building your emotional intelligence. I get that you guys have a high IQ, but now I think it's really clear that in business, the higher our emotional intelligence, the more successful that we are. And that's absolutely the case in dentistry as well. So, you know, everything that we do within Prime Speak, and in fact, most of what we do in Prime as a business is about developing the emotional intelligence of owners, dentists, and of their teams. So, because, you know, as we know, decisions are usually first made with our emotions and then rationalized with our thoughts. So your patients are making decisions in that very emotive brain state, you know, so we've got to find a better way of communicating with patients who, you know, who are in a bit of a different mindset. And when you are motivating your patients towards optimal dentistry, this is another good question to kind of ask yourselves, not a right or a wrong, but, you know, like, what would you focus on? Would you focus more on the benefits of the solution, or would you focus on the impacts of the problem? Now, because I've worked with dentists for 20 years all over the world, I know that most dentists out there would focus on the benefits of the solution. That's just a kind of a key area to focus on. But again, I'm going to ask you guys, and we will go for a poll at this point. What component do you think you would spend most of your time and focus on? Where's your kind of like your home zone dentist? Is it talking about the cause of the problem? Is it talking about the prevention of the problem? Is it talking about the details of the treatment options? Or is it talking about the consequences of no treatment? No right or wrong here. Take a moment to, you know, give me a sense on the poll. We'll just take a few seconds to get everyone to do that, and see what the general consensus here is. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Is that enough time? Have we got enough answers? Not yet. Give me something, guys. All right, come on, let's give the answers anyway. Let's see what most people have said. Okay, 37% said the details of the treatment options, 32% said the consequences of no treatment, and less the cause and less the prevention of the problem. So you would, I would concur. I would concur with you and say that most dentists would focus on the details of the treatment options. Very good. So based on that, and Aristotle would agree with you, by the way. Sorry, Aristotle would not agree with you, but this is the interesting kind of, focus here, right? So you guys focus on mostly, your focus is on the end result, the benefits of the treatment, the end result. Aristotle, however, said the aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure, but to avoid pain. So in prime speak, we say the same thing. We have 5 laws of patient behavior. One of them is called the law of motivation, and it's based on the premise that the avoidance of pain is actually more motivating than the attraction of pleasure. In other words, focus on the damaging results of the existing condition. Look at techniques that will help you to focus on the damaging results of the existing condition. And because if you can do that, then you will get case acceptance. In other words, if a patient is not aware of and concerned about the damaging results of the existing conditions, then they're not likely to be interested in any solutions you offer. In other words, case acceptance is not achieved. So if we ask the question again, and I'm not going to poll you now, but hopefully you'll get this, what component would deepen a patient's concern and awareness, thereby increasing their ownership? The answer is clear that it is around the consequences of no treatment. In other words, what will happen if I don't have treatment, or what will happen if I do suboptimal treatment? So the tip I want to give you now is, like, you can, if you like, focus on the traditional sales model of focusing on the benefit selling, but that just leads the patient to ask themselves, should I spend $10,000 to gain an improvement, to look better, to have long lasting teeth? Or should I look down the prime speak approach, which has the patient look at, should I spend X amount of dollars to avoid an unpleasant outcome? We're not trying to scare patients, but we are trying to deepen their ownership of the problem. That's the tip I want to give you now. When you focus more on the dreck, the problem, I promise you, it will lead to patients seeking the solution, which is exactly what you want. Yeah. So the traditional new patient communications model, when would you normally, this is going to really kind of do your heads in, but like, stay with me for a moment. When would you normally determine what optimum treatment is for a new patient? Most dentists would say in the clinical exam. Now, the problem with that is that if you don't have a sense about what optimum treatment is until you look in the patient's mouth, then the place that you would normally deliver dental education is at the end of the appointment. This is the standard approach for a new patient exam. What's the problem with delivering dental education at the end? How might patients, and this is a good one to think about, how might patients view dental education that is given at the same time as you delivering the options? Well, I would assert that your education is landing as a sales pitch. And that's when things get uncomfortable with your patients, at the end. That's why in the Prime Speak New Patient exam, we literally flip the triangle on its head, where we spend much more time in the preclinical discussion, and starting to educate your patients early on in the appointment about the damaging results of the existing conditions. Yeah. What that does is it creates this really powerful thing called consideration space and consideration time between educating a patient about the potential problems that you're going to see and talking about the solutions. Your patients, and that's that opportunity to be starting to give those pieces of the puzzle. All of this, if you can do this, if you can flip the triangle on its head, it reduces the perception of sales, and it preempts obstacles from coming up later in the consultation. So the third tip I want to give you is look for opportunities to deepen awareness and concerns as early as you can in the appointment, ideally in the preclinical discussion, even before you look in the patient's mouths. And I know what you're thinking to yourself, well, how do I educate them before I've looked in their mouths? You'd have to come to PrimeSeek to find that out, but I want you to trust yourselves as clinicians. If you got the right information, you'd have a pretty good sense about what you probably know will be optimum treatment for any patient that comes in. How do we determine a patient's level of concern about their teeth? Well, there's lots of ways to do it, but I personally think that questions like this, how do you feel about your teeth, are a bit old school and a bit salesy. Okay, sorry if I'm treading on your toes right now, but I'm here to support you. Can you imagine going to the podiatrist and them like, how do you feel about your feet? you know, or going to the the optometrist, and the optometrist saying, well, you know, how do you feel about your eyes? I think, how do you feel about your teeth is a bit of a, you know, a weird question, you know, or how, are you happy with the way your teeth look? Like that for me is an overt sales approach for whitening or Invisalign or whatever it is that you want to do on this aesthetic or cosmetic side of things. Those sorts of questions, almost invariably, when I look at, you know, when people say, but I need those questions, where are those normally asked? Not face to face, but actually usually in the health history form. Usually it's hidden in the health history form because it's such an uncomfortable question to ask that people kind of think, you know what, I'll put it there. And if people answer it, then I'll go down. But if they don't answer it, I'll just leave it alone. I suggest you take it out of your vocab. I'm going to give you two different approaches. I know I'm a little over time, and I'll speak really quickly, Barb, promise. So the two hats one, this is for the aesthetics out there. We don't really work in scripts in Prime, so please don't take this as a script, but I just wanted to give you a couple of like ideas or techniques that I think really valuable. This is for those people who want to do more aesthetics. How do you talk to a patient about aesthetics and cosmetics if they haven't brought it up to you? So it's easy if they've come in and said, I want Invisalign, but what if they haven't? How do you bring it up without saying, well, how do you feel about your teeth? You know, I love the two hats conversation. Again, this is not a script, and it would go something like, you know, Bill, I often wear, and you do this right in the preclinical discussion. I've got two hats as a dentist. One of those hats is an engineer's hat, you know, and I love for things to function correctly when it comes to my patient's teeth. But I also have a beautician's hat. I love for my patient's teeth to look really great because I know how much it makes them feel about themselves. Most of my patients want me to wear both hats, but some people are really only concerned about the function of their teeth, and they're totally happy about the appearance. You know, I can never take off my engineer's hat, but if you'd like me to take off my beautician's hat, I'll be guided by you. And then I'd be silent. And I'd let the patient say, no, I don't want to talk. I don't want you to wear the beautician's hat. Or ideally, I want them to say, yes, I do. If they say, I don't want you to wear your beautician's hat, I'm not going to go down sales. That is not going to get me case acceptance for the cosmetics. It's just going to land as a sales pitch. The sifting statement is more for big patients. Anthony, you had a question there, or is it, do I have to stop?
Yeah, I think we have to. I think we have to get there, Brett. We have to wrap it up.
No problem. I want to leave patients with control creates trust, guys. So we have this, you can either position yourself as a directive, authoritative figure or as a supportive friend. I invite you to really kind of, you know, be that supportive friend and shift the way that you relate to your patients. Thanks, guys. Apologies for going over time.
Brett, thank you very much. Great tips, room for thought, and really appreciate your time. We now welcome Anthony Archer of Henry Schein.
Just making sure you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
That's perfect. Okay, is in presentation mode now?
We are.
Okay, awesome. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening for the next few minutes. The topic I'm going to be covering is how to leverage technology in your practice to optimize its value. And I am with Henry Schein, so before you think I'm going to pitch you on buying more things from us, I mean, there may be an element of that, but I promise to be very subtle or borderline subliminal about it. But really what I'd like to do over the next 10 minutes is talk to you, plant a few seeds and talk to you about a few things that you should or you may want to consider in the next phase of your business, whether you're primed to sell your business at this time, or you're just gaining more knowledge around the factors that can really help you optimize the value of your practice. I smiled, Dr. Anthony, when you talked about doctors, and we see this all the time. It's true. That's why I smiled, unapologetically saying, I have no idea what's happening in our practice, right? And doctors are almost proud in saying that. And we see this, I mean, daily, where so many dentists are preoccupied and working tirelessly, in an effort to deliver dentistry and holding the belief that the activity, the work should or will necessarily translate into greater value for the practice. And that isn't always the case. It isn't necessarily always the case. In my current role right now, I'm responsible for approximately $150 million of business with Henry Schein. As a business segment leader, my responsibility is every day is to look for ways to grow the business, to deliver a positive customer experience, to manage a team of people that come with their own issues and drama, managing expenses, as Barb alluded to a little bit earlier, and I'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation. But when I started in the dental industry 23 years ago, we started a small dental distribution business called Danesca. It was a family-owned business, and we literally started with no sales. We were successful in attracting new salespeople and securing lines as an authorized dealers like 3M, like Oral-B, like Euphrates. And after about 6 years, we had an American company approach us with the intent of acquiring our business. And at the time, that notion was it really never occurred to us that, we weren't ready to do that. We hadn't even thought about it. And we believed that the right thing to do up to that point was to continue to work hard, grow sales, and everything would just take care of itself. It wasn't something that we were thinking about, but we decided to go through the exercise, and it really was eye-opening for us. It was eye-opening because of how little we were offered at the time. And rather the disappointment of being offered so much less than we believed that the company that we had built was worth. It just really was sort of disappointing. We had generated about $8 million of sales in a 6-year period. And the reality was that this was a really good awakening for us. And as Barb mentioned during her presentation, is that it was the perfect place to really start for that business, because it forced us to better understand how we conducted our sales on the daily, where we needed to spend our time. And most importantly, it gave us insight on how investors, potential prospective buyers, would value our business and what we need to do going forward with that disappointment to really optimize the value of our practice. So in everything in life, you need to have a good understanding of where you're starting. If you decide you want to lose weight, you need to understand what you weigh today, and then all the activities moving forward need to be gauged around achieving your goal ultimately. So it's difficult to create a plan or even choose a destination if you don't know where you are and you don't know where you stand. And so the practice evaluation is the perfect place to start to understand, what the plan needs to be to where you want to get to optimize your return on your investment and your really optimize the value of your practice. So in essence, we were forced at that time to look at our business like business owners. And it's important as dentists to be reminded sometimes that often you are business owners primarily, and secondarily dentists, right? And as business owners, there's a multitude of factors that you have to think about. There's cash flow, personnel issues, the retaining, the coaching, managing in-office dynamics, building the right culture, the running of a business, the payroll, compensation, all of those things, the patient experience, case acceptance that we just heard Brett speaking about, and optimizing that. Expense management, it's so critical. Barb, you alluded to that on your chart. I think you had 10.24, which is very much on the high side. And as a dealer, to say that, you think I would be in a position to say, we really want to drive as much revenues with our clients. But the reality is, if we don't help our clients manage their expenses and be in line with industry standards, we're doing them a disfavor, and ultimately someone is going to walk in and do that and help them get in line with where they need to be. And so in Barb's example, I love that it was $20,000 of saving, which is real money. It won't make anyone wealthy, but from a practice valuation standpoint, you're adding $100,000, $140,000 of real money to the value of your practice. One of the ways that we try to help dentists at Henry Schein is we have technology, we have analytical tools to help identify revenue opportunities in your practice and help you secure those dollars. So we have, you know, we conduct a practice analysis. We look at your metrics, every aspect of your business, from your procedural codes and whether or not they're attached, they're tied to fee guides and they're consistent with fee guides. And we really quantify the revenue opportunities in your practice, and we help you secure those dollars. Every dollar of additional revenue that you can drive in your practice, there's about 80 cents that goes right to the bottom line, and 80 cents is about $4 of additional practice value in your practice. So we look for ways to identify revenue opportunities in practices, secure those revenues, and once we've done that, is we look at technology as another way to drive revenue in the practice and to continue the growth of your practice. Did the slide switch there, Barb? Can I get a thumbs up on that one? It did not? Okay. So let me just go into this mode. Can you see the slide now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So one of the questions you may want to ask yourself is understanding, you know, the dentistry that you're doing in your practice. You know, do you know your production mix? What percentage is restorative versus crown and bridge versus implants? And is there an opportunity through technology like diagnostic solutions like 3D CBCT, like scanning, like CAD/CAM, to have better tools for diagnostics and to provide higher level dentistry like implantology, like crown and bridge, that can drive revenues up through those solutions. Brett talked about optimizing case acceptance. It's so critical. So many offices believe that they do this really well, and some do. But the reality, increasing it from 60%, 65% to 80% can have a dramatic impact in your practice. Solutions like 3D CBCT, really, like those diagnostic tools to be able to show patients, intraoral cameras. There are a lot of practices that have, in every operatory, for every patient, for every procedure, they use an intraoral camera. They believe in the notion that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and they want to leverage those images to help a patient understand the treatment and to support the conversation with patients around case acceptance. And that's a great way, relatively low cost method of improving your your case acceptance beyond just understanding how to present the diagnostics and the case to your patients. The other area that you may want to consider, whoops, that was a little slow. I went to the last slide. The right activity, dental activity mix, right? So once again, you know, just churning patients in and out of the practice without really consideration of, you know, whether or not the procedures that you're performing or the types of procedures that you want to perform are linked to the right solutions. So if you want to do more crown and bridge, if you want to do more implantology, for example, have you invested in the right solutions? Have you invested in the right training? And these are areas where we can help upon request. Just want to make sure that it's okay. Do I have one more slide here? Sorry, I may have. Yeah. So do you have the right solutions as well to promote for patient retention? There are recall systems that are really great at providing your team the technology, the solutions to help them communicate and provide a sort of a uniform, a more standard and universal recall log for some of your patients as well. You know, does your office reflect what the standards of care in the industry? Does it reflect the standards of care in the industry? For example, There are studies that show that almost 100% of patients prefer a digital scan versus traditional impression, taking in your office. So do you have the right tools to support the activity and to support, a patient experience, which is so critical in a dental office and in everything we do as human beings, to retain those patients and to really ensure that your revenue is kept in your practice. Lastly, I would say technology can impact without really appearing on your EBITDA, okay, can really have an impact on the perception of the value of your practice. If you have prospective buyers that come into your practice and see that you have the latest technology, right, and see that there isn't additional investments that are required to get to the practice to a level where because the new owner has a challenge of having to build value, having to optimize the value of the practice that they spent a lot of dollars on. And so if they have the technology, it lends itself to the new owners being able to really look at ways to optimize even further the technology that they have, and also to market their practice in a different way, to drive patient activity and new patients into your practice. So scanning can do that. Digital radiography, in essence, all technologies can do that. We see a lot of offices now adopting all tissue lasers in their practice and promoting solutions that can prevent snoring, that can enhance sleep, and things that are really critical in getting word of mouth and a good buzz around your practice beyond just social media and marketing. It's so critical that your patients love that you're taking care of them. So we are here. We can help. We can start conversations around your practice. We can show you, where there are revenue opportunities in your practice and help you secure those revenues. And once we do that, look to leverage those incremental dollars into potentially technology acquisition where it makes sense, to drive additional revenues and, again, optimize the value of your practice. So that's it for me. I'm out of time. Thank you very much. I turn it over to you again, Dr. Anthony.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We've gone around the whole gamut from Barb, starting with her presentation, and then through all our team of experts tonight. I just want to, Anthony, you're not off the hook yet. I have a question, and then I have a question for Nick in 1 second, but we'll go to Anthony first since he's still warm. And this is the tout. You've already answered this, but I want you to answer it from the 10,000-foot level. Anthony, how does a scanner like Trios affect the office production, especially knowing that it is not cost-effective to replace impression material? And I know you touched on it, but please give us a quickie again.
Yeah, no, I think and it's a good question. Like, the ROI may not be clear on something like that, right? And as we look, we talked about managing your expenses. So how do we reconcile managing your expenses and buying a solution that may not have a clear ROI? And my response would be, it's about the patient experience, right? If you can market the fact that people don't have to put the goo in their mouth, which everybody hates, whether you're a gagger or you're not, it's really a poor experience. We've all lived it. We all hate it. And the scanning can really enhance that experience. Also, in terms of the digitization of the practice, the perception of that this is a progressive practice from a patient standpoint, but also from an investor standpoint, is so critical. So the dollars may not be evident there, but from a patient experience, a patient retention, and from a perceived value and from the standpoint of attracting prospective buyers, it's such a powerful solution to integrate in your practice, and it needs to be well marketed, and it needs to be well presented to your patients, and it also demonstrates to your patients that you're making investments in them that enhance their comfort levels, and that really enhance the ability to diagnose and propose sound treatments.
Can I add to that, Anthony, just to say, I also think that the introduction of something like the TRIO system, I think that actually helps with staff retention too. Staff members also hate traditional impressions and are far more likely to fully embrace that new technology and want to. So you want staff retention, not just patient retention. I also think over time, you may find that it's a tool that you can expand beyond what you thought you could, and it can do so much more, and it will actually save time. And save time with your staff allows you to actually treat more patients, which generates more revenue. So yes, it is an initial investment that has multiple long-term financial benefits to you.
And I'm so sorry. That's such a great point, Barb, because the scalability, if you have a scanner, that opens the door for 3D printing. So night guard, sports guard, those kinds of things where you can keep that revenue in-house, that can really support the ROI on, say, a scanner. But it does allow for new technology, new solutions to be adhered to, say, the scanner, for example. Like
piggybacked on top of the scanner. Exactly. Things like the 3D printer guys, you know how much you have what your lab costs are to get a night guard done from the lab, and a 3D printer, the material cost for a 3D printer, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, but I think the material cost for a 3D scanner for a night guard are $5. So your profit on a night guard that you can produce in-house is huge in comparison to what it would be if you had to send that out to the lab.
Okay, thank you to both. Thank you, Barb. Thank you, Anthony. Great things. I wish that I was still in practice full-time, Anthony, because I'd be right up there with you. I just sold my practice at the cusp of all this technology coming out. So thank you again. There was an earlier question that I wanted to revisit, and I wanted to revisit it from my perspective of being a member of the ICRC committee, which is the complaints committee at the Royal College of Dental Surgeons. I chair a panel on that committee, and it has to do with, the question was, I'm pretty sure testimonials are a violation of RDSAO regulations. Thoughts or comments? I think, Nick, you've sort of gone through a number of points in your answer to this question, but I can add to it from my perspective that I just shared with you, is that unless a dentist or an office specifically puts themselves out as a specialist, for one thing, and they're not, they're GP, or they say, we are the best, I am the best at this and that, that's where the RCDSO really comes down heavy on that. Okay, but the other stuff, there's a lot of gray areas. I am not aware of, and I've been doing this for quite a few years now, I have never ever had a case where it came up that a testimonial was complained about. Websites, yes. Again, putting yourself out as the expert on something, one or other, without having an actual specialty behind your name and studies. Even if you're done just by continuing education, you say, I've taken all these hours of education, I am a prosthodontist. No, you're not. Okay, so those are the two elements. That's my thoughts. Okay, are there any other questions in our Q&A? Let me just say, Q&A.
So I just wanted to add to that too. So like according to the RCDSO, like dentists are really not allowed to do anything, right? Like you can't have testimonials, you can't have Google reviews, you can't do anything. But so our clients are across Canada and the States. And in the 5-6 years that I've been working here, we've never had anybody, get in trouble for a testimonial video. The only time people are really calling the RCDSO on you is if, somebody is very annoyed with you about something, like another competitor, right? But in all my time of working here, and we probably have thousands of testimonial videos at this point, we've never had an issue with them at all. So yeah, that's just our 2 cents.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you to all our presenters. We had a couple of really great questions tonight. Thank you for the people that provided those questions. I know that most of you have other questions, and because of time and constraint, we were unable to answer them all, but please feel free to reach out to any of our presenters, and they would be more than pleased to answer your questions offline. We would appreciate you answering a few last poll questions that it just popped up, so please do that. We'll take a minute or so to where's that poll again?
The poll's up, Anthony.
Yeah.
We'd also love feedback from everyone who's on the webinar to let us know. You know, we can reach out separately, individually, but we'd love to know whether or not you love the webinar format, whether you'd prefer an in-person format where maybe you could chat with the participants and the presenters sort of after a discussion. So if you wanted to give us that feedback too, we'd appreciate that.
Keep clicking. The more answers we have, the more effective the poll will be.
I think we're good now. Yeah,
Yeah.
Anthony.
I think it went down on my screen as well. It
Yeah.
went, yeah.
I think we're done with the poll. So
Okay,
we really
thanks,
wanted to
Andrea. I
thank-
thought I was the only one.
No, it went down for me too.
All right. We can't get it back up to see the results, no?
No. Right. I don't think we need to share the results. So
Okay,
fine.
very good. On behalf of all the participants tonight on our panel, I really enjoyed having and meeting all of you. Some of us didn't know each other, but I think it feels like we've known each other forever now. I would like to thank everyone for attending. I hope that you got a lot out of it. I know that personally, I got a lot out of it listening to our experts. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you on our next webinar in the future.
Thanks, all.
Thanks,
Thanks for the
guys.
opportunity.
Thanks
Have a
so
nice
much,
night.
everyone. There is a
And
recording that will be
Excuse me, one
available.
sec. We will have a recording of this. So with the attendees, if you want, we can make that available to you.